Welcome to the Apple Insider Podcast. This is your host, Stephen Robles, and today WWDC Invites went out earlier this week. We're going to talk about it, and Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro 10 are now officially available on iPad. We have a review there, and the headset, we're going to talk about it too. This episode is brought to you by Fast Growing Trees, and joining me this week, my friend Wes Hilliard. How's it going, Wes?
Okay, Stephen. Just thinking about airplanes and not wanting to get on them for a little while anyway.
Wes is talking about the Hijack trailer, a new series that's going to be coming to Apple TV Plus starring Idris Elba. That looks pretty cool. Have you watched Silo, by the way?
No, it's on my to-do list, but that's definitely one of the series I'll be watching.
It's pretty good. I've enjoyed Silo. All right, we got a lot of stuff to talk about. I definitely want to talk about Final Cut at length. Also, I want to give a shout out. You should check out the other podcasts on the Apple Insider Network. I think that's fair to say. We got HomeKit Insider that comes out every Monday. Me and Andrew talk about smart home devices, and also the Apple Insider Daily Show. You can get the top headlines in just a few minutes. You can find links to those in the show notes. And if you're an Apple podcast, you can even go to our channel, which then has all three shows right there in one place. So that's pretty fun. Oh, and also, because I'm sure someone will ask, Brother William, he will be coming back next week. He is back from his long journey. I'm not sure where he traveled. It might have been another planet. It might have been another country. But we will hear from him next week. And so he is back. Listen, I know everyone enjoys the British accent. I kind of wish I had a British accent, Wes. I'm not going to lie.
Oh, you're one of those. All right.
You don't wish for the British accent? You don't want to sound like 007?
It's fine. You know,
Yeah,
it's
fine.
see that's the thing. The one people want is like her Majesty's English. You know, not.
Oh, right. There's a lot of different ones.
Yeah. I mean, I personally would go more for just like pub brawler Irish. You know, just
That'd be a fun one. Oh, that'd be a fun one. Oh, Scottish is pretty fun too. Anyway, let us know. You can send us sound bites of your accents, listeners. We'd love to have those. One quick follow-up. I talked about iCloud Drive last week and the annoyance of removing downloads from the different folders, and there's no easy way to do it on the Mac. Well, apparently, Luke Trevorrow on Mastodon, he actually sent me a link to a blog post by a gentleman named Rakesh, and he actually has a command line, a terminal command, where if you can run it to whatever folder you point it to, it will evict all iCloud Drive downloads within that folder, not deleting the files. It's just removing the local downloads on whatever Mac you run this terminal command on. This is amazing. It's exactly what I wanted. I tried creating a shortcut with it. For some reason, I couldn't get the folder path to work properly, and it kept erroring on me. So I'm going to give this to you, the Apple Insider Army. If you want to figure out how to make this thing work, so I can point this just to my top-level documents folder in iCloud Drive, I saw several different methods. I guess iCloud Drive in a certain path is like a library item or whatever, but then sometimes on the Mac, it just shows like your username, whatever the hard drive. I don't know. So anyway, if you can get this terminal command to work, don't mess anything. Don't mess yourself up. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want you to delete all your stuff trying this out.
Terminal. That's fun. Do you play in Terminal often, or is that a tool you use?
I am so scared of Terminal because I don't know what I'm doing, but I've had several commands over the years. There was one where I was dealing with a lot of images and uploading them to a website where I needed images to be 1,000 pixels or less wide. And I found a terminal command where it took any JPEG on my desktop and just resized it to 1,000 pixels. I made a text expander snippet of it, so I could just command space terminal, open terminal, text expander snippet, boom, all the images on my desktop were now 1,000 pixels wide or less. So I love the power that it gives you. I do most things in shortcuts now because I love shortcuts and I actually understand what's happening. And so running terminal commands scares me a little bit, and that's why I give this with a warning. But this is also, to remove the iCloud Drive downloads from your computer quickly and pervasively. This is great.
I haven't had to dabble in Terminal for a while. For a moment there, I was using it for shortcuts. I would actually turn on my Mac and start Sidecar. So I had a headless Mac Mini, and I used Terminal to basically combine that with a script through shortcuts, run from my iPhone or my iPad to tell the Mac Mini to wake up, log in, and it would log in using my Apple Watch, and then it would run the script and open the terminal, start Sidecar, and connect to the iPad, all with a touch of a button. And that was fun.
Amazing.
Now I have no idea how that works, and I would have to go relearn the whole thing and set it up again. But that was fun. Like I've set up my terminal to be ZSH. I know that Apple's shell changed a couple years ago to some controversy, but yeah,
right.
It's funny that it's still there and we're still using it to this day.
Well, and also I used YouTube DL for a while, which is a way to download YouTube videos and other internet videos, and you do it right from the terminal command line. And I had text expander snippets for that, so I could like copy the YouTube URL and download it. But then I discovered Downy, and Downy's amazing. And updating YouTube DL was kind of a weird process, and I think I went through Homebrew, which that's kind of weird. So I don't use it for that anymore, but I would use it for this, for the iCloud Drive downloads. So.
Oh yeah, Homebrew's fun. I mean, this is also big for like side loading and emulation and stuff like that. Yeah, Terminal is used for a lot of different stuff these days, but only in like the super nerdy community. I think everyone else kind of stays away for good reason.
Yeah, and I would, because you could totally mess up your Mac. Like if you run the wrong command, like everything's deleted.
I remember for a while there, you could turn on the startup sound that was still kind of secret.
Right.
The Apple was re-adding. You could go turn on the startup sound, and there's always some weird command going around that someone's discovered. So
basically, I wait for someone I trust on Twitter to say, "Hey, this command line thing is kind of cool," and then I will, trepidatiously try it.
Yeah,
but
let's just tell everyone to run random command lines that they find.
No, don't do it, please. No, don't do it. Don't only do it if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, don't do it.
But thank you, Luca, for sending that out. Now, WWDC Invites went out to the press earlier this week. And so there was the whole developer round and lottery if you wanted to actually buy a ticket as a developer to WW. Now, they've invited a bunch of press. And I don't know if you feel the same way, but it really feels like a lot of invites went out, way more than past WWDCs. Like they are inviting many people in the press community, influencers, YouTubers. I saw people tweeting their invites that they got via email. I'm still waiting for mine. I think it might be stuck in the mail somewhere. I think maybe it's down the road.
People, I think they have a limited number of seats. It's not like they just...
It is outside.
Open a secret wall in Apple Park and there's 100 yards more grass to sit in,
Sure.
But the way I see it is I think this year they handled it a little differently. I think it was just phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And we saw the initial phase of developer invites, and then we saw a lot of PR journalist invites, and then like phase 3 was the roundup of here's the leftovers. Everyone who could RSVP has. This is what the seats that we have left, and so that's when they bring in different figureheads, a lot of the VR people. I think it's interesting to observe who's coming,
right?
Because that does tell us a lot, but I don't think it's any bigger than last year.
Okay, so yeah, just different crowd, but all that to say, I was listening to the talk show with Gruber and Jason Snell, which if you're not familiar with them, obviously they've been in the Apple community for a long time, the press, they've covered Apple for a long time.
Yeah, if you listen to the show, the talk show's right up your alley. I mean, I would definitely just jump right on that.
I imagine the Venn diagram is pretty overlapped for those who maybe listen to this show and the talk show. But they were talking, and they both feel as though the VR headset or whatever mixed reality headset that Gurman has been very bullish that it is coming at WWDC, like without a doubt. That Gruber and Snell are also very bullish that it is coming out. And they kind of called back to past Apple events, like with the iPhone event in 2007. There was so much pent up just desire for this thing and expectation. Everyone thought they were going to announce a phone. Like it was universal. There were weird renders. There was articles about, is it going to be the iPod phone or what is it going to be called? Very much like the VR headset is today. And if that were to happen and Apple wasn't going to launch an iPhone in 2007, they would have gone through the motions, either back channeling things or feeding things through specific press people to quelch those rumors and leaks. And not necessarily leaks, but just like kind of rumors about the product. They didn't do it because they were announcing an iPhone in 2007. And so it looks like now there's not much effort to quelch the VR or mixed reality headset rumors right now. And also, just a quick second point, that the sales, you'll see a lot of, we've covered the articles talking about how the first year of sales is going to be low and they don't expect to sell a lot of them. That's actually Apple possibly setting expectations for things like investors and analysts so that there is not some kind of, oh, this is going to be a bombshell hit selling millions of units the first year. It's setting the expectation low so then Apple will hopefully surpass it.
I think this emulates the Apple Watch release. They're inviting VR experts. Apple Watch release, they invited fashion experts.
Right.
It's a little too on the nose. Tim Cook's being a little bit more open about it. The wrist is really interesting, and
yeah, he did.
VR is the future and stuff. So like it's there. I don't think it's any secret that this is happening. But the 3 schools of thought. So one, this is a initial reveal that will be followed by an actual hardware reveal somewhere down the line, 6 months, maybe, even next spring, depending on how far out this thing is.
Right.
And it would give developers the chance to go ahead and start running simulators, maybe even get some sort of dev kit. Maybe you get an HTC Vive and you press you run a software thing inside of the Mac, and it turns the software into XROS and lets you dev tool it that way, right? Like there's ways to do this without actually putting the headset out on the market so developers can get ahead. Hideo Kojima is apparently going to be at the event, so we could see some kind of fun Eldritch horror type VR experience. I would love to see a version of Silent Hills that isn't Konami's IP on Apple's headset. That would be really cool.
As you're saying, like speaking to the timeline, I do think it is going to be like the Apple Watch, like you're saying, because if our listeners remember, Apple Watch was actually announced in September 2014, and then we actually had another event actually announcing it with pricing and features in April 2015, and then it was actually available to buy, and I think it delivered on like April 21st, 2015.
Right.
And so that was a 8 to 9 month span from initial reveal to the actual availability of the device. And so, like you're saying, I think very much it's going to be, we might see like a video of the hardware, or maybe even like, that kind of announcement reveal.
I mean, I think they'll have a piece of hardware in their hands. I think you'll be able to walk up and maybe see it behind a glass desk or behind a rope or something.
But it's going to be like the Mac Pro, like behind a glass, you know what I mean? And those who are physically at WWDC, they'll probably be able to like see it in the glass case. I do not think there's going to be live demos for everyone. There might be a select few. They might bring Gruber back, they might bring Snell back and actually use the VR headset. But I think announcement and reveal here at WWDC with the developer story, because it's dub, and then the device will be available to purchase with an actual event talking about pricing and models and more features in the fall.
I would be very surprised if we hear about a price during this event.
No, I don't think we will. Yeah, I don't think we will.
First school slot is developers. Nobody gets it. It's just not on the market. They announce it.
Right.
They do some sort of developer story and simulators that allow them to get ready for the release, but there's no actual hardware on the market, period. The second school of thought would be 100,000 units. So we're seeing this, a couple of rumors point to the availability in the first year is going to be super limited, it's going to be super expensive, and it's going to be focused on, if you are a developer making VR systems, this is for you.
Right.
There'll be like a reservation system. It's not going to be for everyone, and the price is meant to scare everyone away. Like $3,000 for a developer, or even more, not such a big deal, especially if you're this big VR studio.
It's also a tax write-off.
Yeah, tax write-off. You could probably even return it. I don't know.
True.
And get an Apple gift card to buy a Mac Pro. But so that's the second school of thought. I'm leaning that way. I feel like they'll announce it on stage. They'll say, this is the first step. This is to get developers excited. This is to get everyone ready for the platform. And stay tuned, consumers. And basically next spring or something, we'll see the phase 2 VR headset that Quo keeps talking about. That'll be like $1,200. Consumer focused, and by then developers will have had 6 months to a year to actually work on Apple focused VR stuff.
Right.
And of course the third school thinking, which I don't think is right, is basically Apple just drops it out and says, here you go, it's $3,000, everyone can buy one, and we can't wait to see what you do with it. Yeah, that's not going to be what happens.
But I am very curious what, if any, physical developer hardware kit will be, because when Apple announced Apple Silicon at WWDC in 2020, it was a Mac Mini running an A12Z processor. Developers could buy that. I think it was for $500, and then they could get a gift card if they returned it later.
I don't think that's necessary this time, though. Like I said, because the reason the developer kits went out is because of the transition and the need to get the hardware in people's hands.
See, but that though, like if you look at the Apple Watch release, if you were a developer and you wanted to build an Apple Watch app, you could jump into Xcode and run a simulator and see your Apple Watch app on a Apple Watch type device. When you're talking about a VR headset, that is something that has to appeal to both eyeballs. Something different has to be shown.
Oh no, yeah, VR is
a different world.
Very different. If you've never put on a VR headset, find one and put it on. You can't describe the experience. It's just different.
But there's also a big challenge there. If Apple has a developer focused test kit that headset, like I'm sure they'll be explicitly clear, like this is not our headset. This is not what we're launching. There is still going to be months of people trying to build apps on this. And like I imagine the ATP guys will try to address it. And it's going to be a weird time where it's like, this isn't great, but it's also not the actual headset. So
I think this is the Mac Pro all over again. There's going to be wait lists.
yeah.
There's going to be, prioritization. If you're an important studio, you'll probably get handed one, no questions asked.
Right.
A lot of the bigger developers will probably get one immediately without having to get on the wait list, and then everyone else will be on the wait list. That's why, again, go back to my three schools of thinking.
Right.
I'm going with two. They're going to announce it.
Yeah.
It's going to be dev focused. Start shipping in July. It's developers only. Apple's really only expecting to hand out like 100,000 of these things.
Right.
They're not really meant to be on the market. They're going to become a collector's item, but the actual consumer device will be announced like at the end of the year, maybe, probably in the spring. It feels funny. I think this is the oddest thing about this. I don't think we've ever seen Apple announce a developer focused product before. It's never had to happen before, and that's why people are kind of bucking at the idea of they're a consumer company. They would never hold an event and announce a dev tool that's physical, and they've never had to before. The closest thing we get to it is the dev kit, but that's for a product that was launching in September, right? There was like 4 months that dev kit needed to really exist in the wild.
I want to throw one more wrinkle into this, because I do think there might be an option where Apple does not provide dev hardware kits, but instead develop some kind of software connection with an iPhone where, and I've used these before, you could see them. Google Cardboard was a thing. Mm-hmm. Slide your phone into this little visor that sits on your face, even if you just have to hold it up, and your iPhone actually simulates VR by separating and putting it in each eye. It's not a great experience, but it could simulate it. And they could say we have LiDAR built into the iPhone 14 Pro. It can sense where your hands, it has the depth sensor, and you'll be able to simulate building those apps for the headset with your iPhone in this little, VR adapter to have your iPhone inches from your eyes. And that's how you're going to do it until we actually launch.
I think that, or the HTC, use this other headset to develop our tools possible. And there's going to be something that you can do without a headset, without an Apple headset.
Right.
But I think it's going to be so much worse that people will happily divvy out the $3,000 just to have a headset. And again, if Apple sells every single one that they make, I think that their goal will have been met. They'll be happy. Between 100,000, 500,000, the numbers are out there. If they sell all of those, I think that will be good news for the consumer model, and I think it makes sense. But does Apple really want to incentivize people not to go for their dev kit version, the version 1? In this situation, that's the only reason why I would say that's possibly not going to happen, but we'll see.
I'm also just so curious what the story is going to be when Apple announces this thing, because they're going to have to talk about possible use cases. Even when the Apple Watch was announced in September, 8 to 9 months before it was released, they talked about how it was an incredibly accurate timepiece, that it was a fitness tracker, a notification.
The syncing with the atomic clock thing is the funniest, just because I mean, Gruber's so right about this. Like they didn't really have a story. No. They didn't know. They had to get it in people's hands, and the people made the story, and that's why so quickly. I mean, it was literally from the release in what was that, February, March, to the first software update in September, a complete change in the entire how you describe the watch and what it does and how the software is run.
Yeah,
absolute upside down change because Apple didn't have the story. They tried, and it's like it's a watch. It tells time, and and you can send tapbacks to your friends.
And that's why I think this is going to be interesting, because I think you're right. Whatever story they tell at DubDub is probably not going to be the story 2 or 3 years from now, but they're still going to say something,
or even 6 months
right? But they're still going to tell a story, and I'm curious that. But also, being Apple and having the reach, and when they introduce a device like the Apple Watch, it is not a huge hit at first. It's after several years, but then it becomes pervasive. People find the use case that is meaningful for them, and it becomes a sustainable and successful product.
People have really short memories. They like to say, this is going to be a flop. Every Apple product that's ever been known to be announced before it was announced. The predictions were out that it was going to be terrible. The industry is already saturated. It's a mature market. Nobody cares.
Right.
The iPad being the exception, because the iPhone being out for a few years before the iPad basically created the hype for the iPad in a way that no other product has had. That was a standout of, wow, this thing really boomed, and then it fell flat for a few years. Basically, it had to stabilize and get to its own actual market instead of this exploding initial sales. But every other product Apple's had, I think it's funny though, because on the flip side is every time Apple enters a market, the numbers that they get, anyone else in that market would kill for.
Oh yeah.
And I think this is going to be it again. Even at $3,000, this thing's going to sell really well out the gate, just because it has an Apple logo on it. Like,
sure.
it's not like the branding alone is enough. But I think the storytelling that Apple is capable of is really interesting. And for me personally, I think what I'm most excited to see is XROS.
Yeah.
Like, the headset is whatever. I think the platform itself, the software, the operating system, that's the future of Apple, and how they come out the gate and the description and how it all runs. That is more exciting to me.
Absolutely. It is going to be interesting, again, what use cases are different post Apple headset than pre. Because even right now, like speculating on what it could do and the use cases, all we have are previous headsets. Just like when the iPhone launched, all we had to compare were previous smartphones. And the paradigm shift was so dramatic then. I don't know if this will be that, but it could be. And I've only tried a Quest 2 once. I played a Star Wars game, and force pulling a lightsaber to you is pretty cool, but you're also holding a controller and there's like separation of control like that. The rumors are saying that the Apple headset, it will not be a physical controller thing, but it will be hand tracking and everything will be gestures. I think that will be better experience and create interesting use cases inside the headset. But knowing that Apple entering the market will open up to millions of more users accessing and using a headset all the time will inspire developers and encourage companies to actually make more use cases and software and apps for it, and to see what are the possibilities after that. I think it's really exciting. And so I've not been excited about the headset until this week. Now I'm like, I want to see it. I want
to dig into this just a little bit before we move on. XROS specifically.
Right.
I've been researching this for the last few days. I wrote a short, what you'd call a preview for our inside page, which will actually have the real information once Apple announces XROS. But Apple has something that no other VR system has: devices. Apple has iPhones, iPads, Macs, Apple Watches, saturating people's homes. And if this headset is standalone, you can expect that we're going to start seeing the beginnings of Apple's augmented reality XROS platform. So because this is it all kind of clicked when I was writing about this. So we know this is a VR headset. I know you keep using the words mixed reality. That's not technically right, as far as we know. Apple could announce a mixed reality headset, sure. I don't believe that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a VR platform first.
Right.
I've used VR. I had a PSVR headset, used it for years. Loved playing Beat Saber on it until my dog chewed through one of the connection cables.
Oh no.
And that was well, like last year, so it was well into the life of this product. PSVR 2 was days away from being announced. I mourned it and moved on. Sure. So it's going to be a VR experience, right? So it's going to be, you put the headset on, you're inside of a world. You're going to go to an office or a beach, or you're going to play a video game, or drive a car, right? Like, you're going to be inside of an experience. You're completely blocked off from the outside. Virtual reality. That's going to be the primary use case. 99% of the headset is going to be that. But I do believe, like other headsets have been doing, there will be a pass-through mode. But generally speaking, these pass-through modes have been used for finding where the couch is so you don't trip over it while you still have the headset on it. It's a convenience tool, and it's like blurry. It's basically black and white. Maybe you don't really get much detail. You just kind of get to see outside of your headset while you have it on, using the really dim cameras on the headset. Now, Apple's unit is supposed to have really good cameras, and this is where the AR pass-through modes come in. I believe that some part of this headset is going to be able to run AR experiences like what we've seen on iPad with LiDAR. So with the headset on, with the battery pack in your back pocket, this big hulking thing on your head, you'll be able to look at a table in your living room and have like a game pop up on it. Like you'll be able to look down and see a augmented reality object and interact with it. And because you have your hands for gestures and stuff, you'll be able to mold it and interact with it in ways. So this is a little bit more of the augmented reality platform. Mixed reality is a little different. That's when basically the headset uses the space that you're in to recreate atmosphere. So basically it would turn your living room into the Death Star style, but like the furniture is Death Star furniture.
It's like the Emperor's chair. Like your recliner turns into the Emperor's chair.
Right. When you're looking at it, you see a chair, but it's a different design of a chair, and you sit in on it. It's a physical object. That's mixed reality, and that's a little bit more advanced. I don't think that's what we're getting. Right. But yeah, I think this AR pass-through mode is important because we have to keep in mind, this is step one. If you're confused about why Apple's releasing a VR headset when the market's already kind of saturated with Oculus, this platform has to exist in order for the Apple glasses to exist. Apple can't hold this internally for 5 more years developing Apple Glass and XROS without any external input. They need this out on the market. Everyone's going to buy it and use it as a VR headset and watch 3D movies in a theater and stuff and play Beat Saber. Great, but it's also going to allow developers to bring their AR experiences out of the iPhone and iPad into a headset that you can wear and start training these things on what if this was a set of glasses. And that's what's exciting to me. And I think we're going to see a little bit of that here, and it's only going to get better over the next few years. And that's what I would buy one for. Hopefully the consumer version of this isn't too bad, because I don't think I'm going to be able to afford a $3,000 headset. At least I don't want to have to spend that money on something. Honestly, I would probably only play Beat Saber on. So.
Right, a $3,000 Beat Saber machine seems a little off, but I do think there will be a version that is less expensive, more consumer accessible, because that's what Apple does to all of their product lines. Like even if they start out super high end or expensive, like they do offer cheaper versions in the future. So, but yeah, I'm excited. WWDC, we're literally just over a week away, and we will finally see what Apple has in store.
Yeah, this is one of the rare, if only, Apple products that is going to be released that isn't important as what it is heralding next, right? This is literally a product that says, I am not the one that you should be looking at, look ahead. And like the iPhone coming out, it's always been about the iPhone. The Apple Watch has always been about the Apple Watch. The iPad's always been about the iPad. So I don't think we've ever had this happen with Apple before, but the VR headset is not about the VR headset. It's about what's next. And that's cool. Is compelling. Can't wait.
Very cool. This episode is brought to you by Fast Growing Trees. Have you ever heard of a peanut butter fruit tree? Listen, I had not heard of that either. But as I was browsing fastgrowingfruittrees.com, as you do, I found a peanut butter fruit tree and I had to have it. And so we got it, and it's wonderful. And I have to recommend that you go to fastgrowingtrees.com and you'll find something you can love too. Breathe some life into your backyard with fastgrowingtrees.com this spring and summer. From shade to fresh fruit to privacy, natural beauty, let Fast Growing Trees help you plant your dream garden with their expert advice and reliable shipping. Listen, that's the best part of Fast Growing Trees, because if you wanted to buy a plant or a tree and like actually drive to a hardware store or a nursery, put that thing in the back of your car or truck, and now there's dirt everywhere. There's dirt everywhere. It's not a good experience. You got to drag it from the car to the backyard. Don't do that. Fast Growing Trees ships those plants directly to your door. It's packaged beautifully. You can carry it to the backyard, not get dirt anywhere, and then take it out, keep it in the pot for a little while, plant it in the ground, all of that, and it is super easy. So no more waiting in long lines and hauling heavy plants around. With fastgrowingtrees.com, you do your order online, plants arrive at your door in just a few days. And you actually tell it what state you're in, what region, and then it will let you know what plants will flourish in your environment. And that's important. You want something that's going to thrive wherever it's planted. And with Fast Growing Trees' 30-day Alive and Thrive guarantee, you know everything will look great fresh out of the box. So join over 1.5 million happy Fast Growing Trees customers and go to fastgrowingtrees.com/AppleInsider now to get 15% off your entire order. Get 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com/AppleInsider. The link is in the show notes as well. Our thanks to Fast Growing Trees for sponsoring this episode. All right, let's hit just a few other news bits, and then I want to talk about Final Cut on iPad. Apple announced its Design Awards nominees, and there were a bunch of apps. We'll put the link in the show notes, but just 3 I wanted to mention because I use them, and I really enjoy them, and I think they deserve this nomination. Flighty, an incredible flight tracking app. Headspace, They've actually been a sponsor on this episode. Love their app. And one I thought was really interesting was Camo Studio has actually been featured. Camo Studio has actually been nominated for an Apple Design Awards. And Camo is actually use your iPhone as a webcam utility. And I think it's great that Apple still highlighted this application while they still have continuity camera as a feature on the iPhone and Mac just built into their system first party. So kudos to Apple for still recognizing apps that seemingly have been Sherlocked, but also Camo Studio offers a lot more features than continuity camera does. So really cool. And there's some great apps there. You can check out the article in the show notes.
Camo getting the innovation nomination
Right.
just makes sense because they created a system pre-Apple to do this. So that's pretty innovative on top of the fact that they do way more than Apple out of the box. But I wanted to point out too how funny it is. A lot of these, there's a lot of games in here, a lot more than you would think.
Yeah.
Diablo Immortal, Resident Evil Village, Marvel Snap. Having just watched PlayStation's showcase, I would love to see a future where Apple just has a Game Awards show or something, or maybe they go to the Game Awards because there's an official Game Awards. We've discussed this before. Right. I don't know. I just think it's funny. Like Stitch is nominated, and that's a simple little game. Marvel Snap obviously being here is funny because that just exploded. Looking at the innovation section, it's a AI tennis app. We've seen that mentioned during keynotes before. Camo Studio, a sleep tracker.
Yeah.
Right. Those are the 3 apps. And then Resident Evil Village, Stitch, and Marvel Snap, 3 games. So I just think like 3 apps versus 3 games, it seems a little odd to me. Like why don't they break out a game category like best game or most innovative game? So I think maybe that's coming, especially with Apple Arcade. But I just thought that was an interesting part of the awards this year.
And Apple did actually award a podcast like Podcast of the Year award last year. So yeah, it would definitely make sense for games and stuff. That'd be cool. I wanted to mention Adobe Generative Fill. We've talked about different AI features on the show, but seeing videos of this in action is pretty wild. This is Adobe building its Firefly AI tool into Photoshop. And basically, there's content-aware fill. We've had that in Photoshop and things like Pixelmator Pro for a long time. There was a picture I saw where there was like a bicyclist on a road. And in the Photoshop interface, someone will like select a bunch of cracks in the road, and then a text prompt comes up and you could say, remove the cracks and potholes in this road. The generative fill just does it. And then it selected part of the road and it said, add a double yellow striped line down this road, adds it right on the image. Wild. It has to like expand the image to make it even wider, and it's way better than content aware fill ever was. And you're typing in a text box these prompts that you would think of doing in like Midjourney or ChatGPT, but it's right in Photoshop and it's wild. Just amazing.
Yeah, these are tools I can get behind. This is very smart. It basically takes the things that humans were doing already and accelerates it, right? So this isn't one of those you're being replaced by a human situation or a robot situation. This is more of you're enhancing your workflows and getting more done faster.
Right.
This makes a lot of sense to me. One of the funnier things I saw done with this, if you if you use Twitter and you're in the tech space and follow a bunch of people, you probably saw this. Ian Zelbo, the guy who makes renders,
yes.
he posted a photo of his desk setup and said, "Find a cable," and people were circling cables, and it was just a silly chat thread. I think it was Aaron piece. Anyway, it was one of those guys. He used Adobe's system to add a giant like floor cable to the picture. And it's just like there's a cable, and it's this gigantic like what you would call like an industrial size cable, but it looked like it belonged there, like it was always in the photo. And I had to go double check, and it's like, where'd this come from? But
yeah,
that was pretty clever. And it's like, yeah, these kinds of tools that can be used for making a magazine cover or making a silly meme. So I think that's fun.
It's pretty cool. So iOS 17, Gurman had this recent leak or rumor that in iOS 17, when it comes to DubDub, that the iPhone will get a smart display mode when it is put on a charger, like a MagSafe charger. We have something similar on the watch. Like if you put your Apple Watch on its charger, it goes into nightstand mode. You see the time and the little charging symbol and a little red dot for notifications. But he is saying now that with iOS 17, you'll be able to put an iPhone on a charger, and this smart display could show things like HomeKit scenes, maybe even widgets. And this will be a precursor to a future smart display, either a standalone device like a HomePod with screen that we've heard about for several years, or maybe like some kind of docking mechanism for an iPad having this smart display. I'm excited for this. Obviously, I'm a huge HomeKit user, and so I would love to be able to have some HomeKit scenes right there on the lock screen, be able to run them on my iPhone. When I put it on my MagSafe charger at night, I use the Belkin 3-in-1 like tree charging stand, so the iPhone is at like a perfect angle for that. I am interested and curious how Apple will implement touch controls on something like a lock screen control panel and how it will handle unlocking and authentication. I hope there will be a setting that you can say, let me interact with this display. And because iPhone 14 Pro is an always on display, it could just be on and visible. And you could just tap a HomeKit screen with one tap. It will run the scene and be done. Or will Apple force like Face ID to unlock the phone first, at least invisibly, and then it will be interactive and you'll be able to touch a scene or interact with a widget? So curious how that would actually play out in real world use cases, but I would be excited for this. I would love to be able to have HomeKit scene triggers on my iPhone display next to my bed. I have a dedicated Eve button, which is a HomeKit button, and I press it just for my good night scene at night, and it would just make a lot of sense. My iPhone is right there on the nightstand next to the button. If I could just tap the screen and run the same scene.
Basically, what's been described is the iPhone's in landscape, it's locked, and you see a series of information about the home and perhaps other information. And that's where it kind of gets away from itself a little bit. I think this is just an expansion of the always on lock screen that we've seen with iPhone 14 Pro and the iOS 16's lock screen customization system. The reason why I say that is because iPad OS 17 is going to get this lock screen feature. I mean, that's almost guaranteed. The Apple staggers these year by year. I can't wait for that, by the way, having widgets and a customization system for iPads. That's going to be great. Hopefully we get an always on iPad. But anyway, for that to work on iPad OS 17, we got a larger screen. That means placing more widgets. That means more widget types and sizes. Mm-hmm. I think this landscape iPhone version is just that. It's a further enhancement.
Sure.
That widget system. Now that the developers are going to be able to make larger iPad widgets, those same widgets will become available in certain sizes on the iPhone as well. You're going to have more space. You're going to have more space for more information. So you'll turn the phone landscape. You'll have this large clock in the center, and maybe on either side you'll be able to have 6 widget groups or maybe a square widget. Tapping it, you might be able to assign a shortcut or something. So sure, you might be able to do those kinds of things that you're expecting. Mm-hmm. But just like the lock screen widgets of today, tapping it would force the phone to do a Face ID check, unlock the phone, open the app, and run whatever program you're telling it to do.
Yeah,
which is fine. But I don't expect this to be a fully interactive smart display. I think that was a good way to get everyone hyped up for it. But I think this is just an advancement of the existing lock screen system. But I will say this does seem like a precursor for what could be next for a smart display of some kind with widgets and controls and stuff like that on this always on display. So I think that part can be true as well, but I wouldn't get your hopes up about like a super interactive, really smart thing. But on another note, all of this come to tvOS and let me have a giant information board instead of a screensaver or on top of the screensaver. But moving on.
And just real quick, because I had several clients over the years want a live dashboard view of different like pieces of data or whatever. And I was able to do it with things like Amazon Fire Sticks and other devices. And there were like third-party applications where you could build dashboards that pull data from like Google spreadsheets, because you can set Google spreadsheets as public where it's just accessible via a URL on the web. And these like dashboard things, I think one was called like Gecko Board. And you could I built these live dashboards with it. And just seeing that flexibility, not that I necessarily want all that on an Apple TV, but just having more use case for the Apple TV screen. Like the screensavers are beautiful. I love all the aerial screensavers when my Apple TV has gone to sleep because I'm talking to people and we haven't started watching something yet. But
I love when there's new ones and it's just like, look, it's a new
place.
I
love it. And you lightly tap the Apple TV remote or tap it on your phone and you can see the location, like where that aerial footage was taken. But yeah, I would love more options for like what can be displayed on this massive screen. Yes, aerials are beautiful, but maybe even just like widgets overlaid on that, like the Google Chromecast. You have awesome wallpapers, but then you could also just have like the weather, if you would just want that in the corner. But
yeah, I think all of these are interesting concepts for what's coming in Apple's software pipeline, but again, we're talking about Apple,
That is
so we
worth a
have
while.
to be a little more conservative.
Well, listen, I would just like first-party HomeKit widgets. My goodness, like
Right,
there's no
right.
home widgets for the lock screen or the home screen on iPhone from Apple's own home app.
I think this is the same situation that we have with iPad OS 17 getting lock screen widgets a year later. So that could be a thing, and that'll be great. More focus modes would be nice. I'm still begging and pleading for alternate app icons. I would love dark icons, but that's never going to happen from Apple anyway, not first party. But I think this will be an interesting WWDC.
For sure. All right, I want to round out the show talking about Final Cut Pro on iPad. I did not really try Logic Pro 10. Actually, both of my sons requested it just today. Like this morning, I think they realized it was out. And so they are literally downloading it right now. And so I will report back their review of Logic Pro 10 maybe on the next episode. But I have tried Final Cut Pro. I made a little video about it. I have lots of thoughts. But have you tried it at all? Just out of curiosity?
No, these apps, they're too far outside of my wheelhouse.
Sure.
I have no, like, I would go in and press a couple of buttons and be like, that's neat. If there's something that comes up that would let me use these and try them out, sure, but I'm not going to go on a whim and throw $5 at something that, like, I'll wait a little bit, and once Apple wows me with something that makes me say, wow, that's something I can do, then I'll go and try it out. But there's just nothing there for me right now.
Well, I will say it is clear after using it for several days that Final Cut Pro for iPad is not for Final Cut users on the Mac who spend all day in Final Cut. And that is me. I edit several videos every week, multiple videos, like 3+ in Final Cut on the Mac. I love Final Cut on the Mac. It's wonderful. And moving to Final Cut Pro on iPad, it is still a very different experience. While powerful, and Apple added some key features that I think are great, and I'll mention those in a second, it is clearly not meant for Final Cut Mac users to say, oh, maybe I'll just use Final Cut like normal on an iPad. That is not the case. It is a very different application. Two key issues, and then I'll talk about the good things. Number one, you cannot edit in Final Cut Pro on iPad with your footage stored on an external drive. This is something Final Cut Pro on Mac does, obviously, and also LumaFusion on iPad and DaVinci Resolve on iPad let you have all your footage on an external drive. Let's say you have a Thunderbolt SSD that's connected to your iPad. Both LumaFusion and DaVinci let you point to a folder on that external drive using the built-in files interface on the iPad and says, reference the footage on this drive, let me edit it in the app, but don't physically copy it to my device. Why? Because maybe you only got the 256 gigabyte version iPad and you just don't have enough room for a ton of 4K footage. And to put a little perspective on it, I tried editing a full YouTube video I was making in Final Cut on iPad, and it was over 70 gigabytes of footage, and I wasn't even done yet bringing all the footage in. So if you're editing 4K video at a high quality and you wanted to do it on iPad, you might be able to have 3 projects max stored on the device, and then you would have to constantly offload or shuffle footage around because your iPad wouldn't be able to hold it.
Or, just...
Well, I have a 1 terabyte iPad, but even so, minimal.
You also have, everything you've ever done on there. But no, I think that's an issue. I think that's something that they'll address because, like I said in the last episode,
I think so.
That's a part of the system. Like you can address things outside in an SSD, and I don't think you have to bring it in with every app. I don't know. And you said, like you said, LumaFusion does this, so
yeah,
I think this is coming. These apps are interesting. And I may not have used them, but I understand what's going on with them. I've read a lot of interactions with them, like what people have thought, and take on it is basically everyone's coming at it from the wrong direction. I think these apps, I don't know. I mean, Apple came out of the gate, I think in their introduction video, didn't they show someone making like a TikTok video or something?
Yes. Yeah, vertical video.
Or an Instagram vertical video. Like that's cool, but so yeah, go record 4K ProRes and edit it on your iPad for Instagram. I know that's overkill, but that's kind of like what Apple's saying you can do here because these devices are so powerful. But I made a stupid joke on Mastodon. You open up YouTube and there's a guy sitting in front of $30,000 of camera equipment with 1.5 million subscribers saying that Final Cut on iPad is half baked.
Well, yeah.
And there's a teenager with $5 saying, "Wait, what a minute! I can use Final Cut? I have $5."
Right.
So like that, I think that's the difference here.
Like you're saying, you have to have the right mindset, and that's why for me, I was thinking maybe I can move my workflow to the iPad, which is not the case. But like you're saying, I also think is not yet and is the wrong mindset. Because the other part that was difficult for me in editing was that there are many keyboard shortcuts and tools that are really like first top level in Final Cut. If you're just starting to edit on the Mac, you're going to learn to use the blade tool, which is you press B on the keyboard and you click on your clip in the timeline and it cuts it. And now you can adjust the in point, out point, separate, whatever. And that blade tool, while present on Final Cut Pro on the iPad, it functions very differently, takes a few more taps to actually use in the timeline. And it's clear it is not meant for a Final Cut user on the Mac who uses a bunch of keyboard shortcuts to just go to the iPad with a magic keyboard and do the same.
That's the thing with iPad OS. Keyboard shortcuts systems are very limited, even for developers adding them to their apps. This is one of those things that like could happen at WWDC this year, and I think maybe because of these pro apps coming, it's a good sign. Apple could open up or even build an entire API around system-wide or just app-wide keyboard shortcuts for developers that is implemented right now that would completely open this up and give us access to basically all of the commands that we want now, or even just give us programmatic ones that we can create inside of the tools. And that would change the game. But again, that would require a system update. So we'll just have to see what iPadOS 17 has to offer.
And I do want to mention there are some unique features that, again, make clear the use case Apple intended and make it useful for me personally, where the auto crop, which we mentioned when we talked about it, but pulling in a piece of video footage and having Final Cut track the subject, namely someone's face or whatever objects they're holding, and crop that 16:9 footage into a vertical clip so the subject is always in the frame, that is going to be an incredible tool for me for making shorts out of long-form video content. And again, speaks to, I think Apple sees this as a mobile content creation platform and one really geared towards short-form video or clips for social media, not the same workflows as Final Cut on the desktop. The last thing I'll say about it is the one area where I do think Apple missed it a little bit was how the Apple Pencil functions inside Final Cut on the iPad. Apple touts often the different interactions you can do with the Apple Pencil. They introduced Apple Pencil Hover with the M2 iPad Pro, freeform app, notes. Like Apple is no stranger to the functionality of the Apple Pencil in different applications, even things like Keynote and Pages on the iPad and all of that. And for someone who edits podcasts on iPad every week, the interaction that the Apple Pencil gives me editing audio, it's so much faster for me. I've talked about it before. And so I think, and my expectation was that I would be able to edit with a similar speed because I'm used to editing with Apple Pencil on iPad in Final Cut. And there's just weird things like it's missing a unique input control. Like the Apple Pencil in Final Cut on iPad, if you have Apple Pencil Hover, which is only M2 iPad Pros, that is pretty cool, scrubbing footage without actually touching the screen. Like, that's cool. Slightly, like, I don't know how useful that is, but it's cool. But otherwise, the Apple Pencil is really just a substitute for your finger inside the UI, tapping the controls, tapping the clips. It doesn't do different things than your finger can. And that's where, and I understand Apple needs to build it where if someone doesn't have an Apple Pencil, they can still utilize everything in the software. That's the difference where in Ferrite, you can still do everything with your finger. Like an app has been built that allows that. But Ferrite also allows you, when you connect an Apple Pencil with the app, there's a whole host of additional controls that are then open to you. And you can say, I want the pencil to delete when I drag it across the screen, but my finger moves the timeline. And just that simple distinction where I can scrub back and forth in the timeline with my finger, and then when I delete something, I use the pencil and I can go back and forth without any lag or waiting because it's two different input controls. That allows such faster editing in Ferrite, and that's the kind of interaction I was hoping for, or at least some kind of interaction innovation in Final Cut. This stuff could still come. I could see it in like Final Cut 2.0 where the Apple Pencil now has an entire preference pane. And I hopefully it goes that way because I think it would make it much more enjoyable to edit for those of us who really like Apple Pencil gesturing and things like that.
The only concern I would have is, does Apple find that too antithetical to its design? Does it? Yeah. Does that kind of complexity go against what Apple wants in a device to say you can do whatever you want, but only if you have this pencil, only if you want to do these, and that you start siloing these features into things, which is great for pros who want total control. but I think that might go against a little bit of Apple's approach of making it friendly for everyone.
Yeah, they're using perhaps, and also like features like Scribble. Like you can't do Scribble with your finger. That's an Apple Pencil specific feature. So, I mean, they do it.
We have time for one last little thing, because I wanted to say this. I won't be back, right? Because William's going to be here next week. So
William's on next week.
So I won't be back till after the keynote for WWDC, right?
Right.
That's how close we are. It's crazy. So I wanted us to do, what if you had just one wish list item that would be fulfilled, like your one thing? What would you like Apple to do?
I had a huge list, and I moved it to next week because we ran out of time this week. If I could have
just one thing.
One thing.
Standalone passwords app, maybe.
I was gonna say that, but this is going to be weird. I'm torn right now between shortcuts automations on the Mac, because that would be a big deal, or this is so small, but actual snooze in mail.
Oh, I thought you were going to pick that. That's fun.
Because I literally have to open either Fast Mail or the Gmail app just to snooze an email message so it disappears from my inbox. And I would love to, because I use Apple Mail on all of my devices. I have 4 to 5 email accounts across all those. I would love to just be able to snooze natively in those interfaces and not have to jump into these other apps to do it. So it's one of those two, but if I could only have one of those, I would probably go with shortcuts automations on the Mac. I really want those.
So if you can only do one of those, you would do 3 of those. Got it.
No, the shortcuts automations on the Mac. That's my one. That's my one. What's your one?
It's tough. I think I would go with one of your picks here is just redesigning Apple's simpler database system apps. So contacts, calendars. Specifically, I would love to see a redesign of contacts, but like if all 3, contacts, calendars, and mail. Yeah. Like if Apple could just, those productivity apps, just revamp those, reimagine them for 2023, that'd be amazing. But most specifically, contacts, because so much we've written about it. We've hammered this into the ground. So much of like Siri's intelligence about who you are as a person and who your relationships are and people, dates, photos app, everything pulls from contacts. There's just so much database information in there. Giving that some love would enhance everything. And I think it would be really interesting to see what Apple could do with contacts today. I know that's boring, but I think it's also kind of interesting. But one last thing, and I know this is cheating. This isn't WWDC related, but one wish list item, just in general, Apple, make it so I can disable specific genres of music from my recommendations engine, so I can listen to sleep sounds in Apple Music without having to disable recommendations every time, because that's madness. Or B, let me disable recommendations using a shortcuts action at bedtime. One or the other, something, please. It doesn't have to be at WWDC. Do it tomorrow. Just do something. Thank you.
That's good. Let us know. We're going to be doing our big wish list next week. William will join me. We'll talk about macOS, iPadOS, and I have a wish list right here ready. So send them to us. You can send it to Wes and myself. Our links are in the show notes for Mastodon and Twitter. Of course, you can support the show, patreon.com/AppleInsider, or directly in Apple Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.